What's up guys, I'm Lee Morris with Fstoppers.com, and today we are going to be comparing the expensive gimbal setup with the medium price gimbal setup all the way down to the cheapest possible setup. About a year or two ago, the gimbal company Moza sent us over the Moza Air, and as you can see, this gimbal is powerful enough to hold onto a big DSLR and a big honking lens. This is the D850 with the Tamron 24-72.8, and for a long time this setup with this camera or with the Nikon D750 was our go-to setup for filming almost everything that we did, but especially gimbal stuff. Now, about a year ago, we moved over to the GH5, and Moza then sent us over the Air Cross. Now, this gimbal may appear to be a little bit taller, but that's just because of the tripod here we have on the bottom. It's actually a little bit smaller, and it is significantly lighter, and we think it's perfect for the GH5. I don't think that it could handle a camera like this, but for shooting on the GH5, it's perfect. Now, just the other day, Moza sent over their newest gimbal, which as you can see is for the iPhone. I've got my iPhone 10 in here right now. And before you jump down my throat and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you'd even consider using the iPhone, you consider this. We have actually been using the iPhone to film gimbal shots for years now, not just with the iPhone 8 or the iPhone 10. We've been using the iPhone back with like the iPhone 4, iPhone 4S, iPhone 5, 5S, and we have not only been using it to capture gimbal footage that you guys see on YouTube, we've actually been using the iPhone to get professional footage that we're actually selling to clients. Just last year, we flew around the United States with Alaya and we filmed this promo for Fuji. We were hiking around a lot and we didn't want to carry a camera everywhere we went, so a lot of that footage was actually shot with a gimbal very similar to this and our iPhone. Now, when Moza reached out and asked if we wanted to review this gimbal, I wasn't that interested. We already own some other gimbals for the iPhone. At this point, I own so many gimbals, I don't know what to do with them all. But then David told me that this one has one very interesting feature, and that's that this thing can do wireless charging. So as you know, the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 currently have wireless charging, and I must admit, especially when we're out on the road filming, my iPhone will drain, and at times I'm needing to get the shot and I can't get it because it doesn't have enough battery life. But when you put this thing on the gimbal, you can choose to double tap and it will actually start charging your phone wirelessly. You don't have to worry about bringing some extra cable along that you're gonna lose or that's gonna break or fray or whatever. It just works right out of the box. And so when I heard that, I said, send it over. I wanna give that thing a try. The other awesome thing about this gimbal is that it also can connect to the phone wirelessly as well. So on the thumb joystick back here, we have tons of different options. And if you're interested in downloading the Moza app for this gimbal, you can control so many different aspects of the camera in terms of how it's actually recording, all the different frame rates, the different resolutions. You can do zooming in and zooming out. You can do zoom ins very slowly and smoothly. It will do it automatically for you. And of course, all of the buttons on the back of the gimbal also control the gimbal. So if you want to point the camera right up in the air and get some shots looking straight up, or you want to do selfie mode, or you want it to follow your movement, or you want it to stay perfectly straight ahead, almost all of the features that the big boys have on the sides here, this little guy has as well. One other crazy thing that we haven't really gotten deep into is that it apparently has motion tracking. So you can set a little square on a subject, and as you're walking around, it will follow them if they move in and out of the frame. Personally, I like doing things manually, so I'm not sure how many of these features I'm actually going to use, but it's nice to have them in. So now let's actually compare these gimbals and these cameras, and let's see what the video quality actually looks like. What we did is we went outside and I walked up and down the path right by our office here. As you can see, as I cycle through each one of these cameras, they look pretty similar. Each one of the cameras is set to 4K, 24 frames per second. And you'll notice that all of this footage looks nice and smooth. The exposures look pretty similar. You might notice that the iPhone has a tendency to blow the highlights a little bit more quickly than the other two cameras. But man, I was very impressed by how all of these cameras performed. Now keep in mind that the Nikon camera has stabilization in the lens, the GH5 has stabilization in the lens and in the camera body, And we also had stabilization on with the iPhone as well. So it also has optical stabilization, and that's working in conjunction with the gimbal to make your footage even more smooth. Now, you may notice that there are the occasional jumps and hiccups with the iPhone footage, and I think what's happening is the optical stabilization is bouncing around a little bit. We've had this problem before. At times it may look like the camera's actually trying to autofocus, but we actually had that locked. So that is a problem with cell phones that have optical stabilization. It's not quite as smooth as higher end cameras. Now, if I had to choose the best quality footage, I would probably choose the Panasonic GH5, but if you guys know me, you know I'm not a pixel peeper at this point. I'm kind of all about what's the easiest way to get the shot, and is the client going to be able to tell, and does the footage look out of place when you put it with the other footage that we're using. And in my opinion, I think all three of these cameras are very usable, especially for the type of stuff that we shoot. You will notice that the footage out of the iPhone is a little bit crunchier. It's like graded in the camera, whereas the GH5 and the Nikon D850, we can shoot in a flatter profile, and then we can add that contrast later if we want to. But looking at this footage side by side, I think it looks pretty similar, especially when you compare the price tags on each one of these systems. This entire setup over here with the camera, lens, and gimbal is $4,800, so it's certainly not cheap at all. The setup that we have over here with the Air Cross and the GH5, we have a 12-35 2.8 lens on this. It costs right around $3,400, so it's certainly not cheap either. This setup here in the middle, I'm going to say this is only $109, and I know people on YouTube are gonna get mad. Whoa, the iPhone 10 cost $1,100 or whatever. I'm not even going to include the iPhone in the cost because I assume that anybody watching this video has a smartphone. Do you have to have an iPhone 10? Absolutely not. Like I said, we've been filming with the iPhone for years now, and nobody has ever been able to notice when we mix it in with footage from our other more professional cameras. You could literally go online and buy an iPhone 6 for probably like $50 to $100 right now. You could buy an iPhone 7 for probably $100 to $200 right now. So at most, this setup should be $200 or $300, but like I said, I'm just going to count the gimbal because I assume everybody watching this already has a smartphone that can probably shoot incredible video footage. So when you think about price and when you think thousands of dollars and then $109, I think this is something that every videographer should have in their bag. It shouldn't be the first thing that you grab, especially if you're on a professional video shoot. You don't really want to be seen with this setup. But if you're like us, a lot of times you're shooting without the client watching, you just have to get the shot, and maybe you're not going to have your camera on you all the time. You can't beat this. This is the absolute cheapest way to get steady footage, and it still looks awesome. So we were recently in Patagonia, and we had two setups. We had the GH5 setup, and we had a small gimbal like this for our iPhone. And I must admit that most of the time, as long as we weren't having to hike too far, I did reach for the Air Cross just because we've got the GH5. I like having a little bit more manual control. Obviously, it's a better video camera than the iPhone. But there were still times when we were having to hike a long distance and I didn't want to carry this entire thing, or maybe I didn't want to carry a backpack at all. And using the iPhone was still a really good choice for us. So even though shooting on the iPhone is certainly not my first choice every single time, it's an option that I like to keep open. For more content just like this, head over to fstoppers.com. And if you'd like to check out our full-length photography tutorials, head over to fstoppers.com/store.